Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I'm your professor, Dr. Dowdell, and this is another video where we're going to walk through the Jetpack Compose project step by step so you can see exactly how to build in Android Studio. Now, in this exercise, this is where we're going to pull everything we've practiced so far, layout, alignment, padding, resources, and then we're going to add one new concept, which is called weight. And we're going to be working with this compose quadrant, which is the fourth practice in the compose basics. Now, when we talk about weight, weight is the trick that lets us divide the screen evenly. So if you've ever wondered like how to make two columns take up, say, equal space, or how to split the screen into sections, this is exactly that. So let's go ahead and let's open up our Android Studio and let's create an empty activity project. Now remember, if you're not presented with the menu here to start a new project, and you open it up and it's into maybe an existing project, just go ahead and close that project out. Now for our course, if you're watching this video as part of our course, you're not going to do any updates. We want to standardize on the version of Android Studio that we're working with. We don't want to change up during the course. But if you are watching this outside of the course and you're presented, with the update, you're free to go ahead and update. I'm not going to update, so I'm going to go ahead and close that out. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a new project. So we're going to click on new project. And then just like before, we're going to select the empty activity. And for the name of this project, we're going to call it Compose Quadrant, if I can spell, okay? And then we'll leave everything else as default here. And then we'll go ahead and we'll click Finish. Let me bring this over so that you can see. And just as before, it's going to go through generating various different things, loading the project, importing, any files that it needs, and syncing your Cradle. So we'll go ahead and wait for that. And when it's ready, we'll see nothing down here importing, and of course you'll be seeing your main activity Kotlin file. Okay, so my Cradle's finished syncing, and I like to do mine in a split screen by clicking on this button up here so that I can kind of see my preview as I go along. Now, if yours came up as in the project, looking at the project files, then go ahead and you're going to go ahead and switch this, so that you're actually, looking at it as far as um, in the correct file that we need to look at it in. So go ahead and change it to project files so that you're able to pull up the project files. Now, one of the first things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding to our strings XML. And if you watch some of the other videos, this is how we feed in like text into our app without actually hard coding it. Within our script, we'll use like a string XML file. And then what we'll do is we'll reference that XML file and the different components, of that. Of those different strings in that XML file within our code. And remember, this makes it so that we're able to, if we wanted to do some translating and things like that, and also if we need to modify text, we don't actually have to go into our code and modify that text. We can modify it within the strings XML. And so we find strings XML, remember, under app, then we go under source, and then we're going to go under main. We're going to expand main. And this is going to be in our resources and then in our values. And this is our string file here. Okay, so this is the one that we're going to be working with, and we're going to be pulling our string information directly from the Compose basics from the actual like tutorial. So we're going to be using, these are going to be the strings that we're going to use, and we're going to match the ID, the string IDs to the solution. If you wanted to take a look at the solution, make sure, that your code was correct. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing is we're going to do this text composable. And this is going to be, if we look at this, okay, this is going to be like the title, the first title. So we're going to, let's say this is the first quadrant, and then this is going to be like our second quadrant. This is going to be our third quadrant, and this is going to be our fourth quadrant. And each of these has text in it. And so what we're going to do is this is the text that's in there, and we're going to assign it string IDs within that string XML, so that we can be able to display the correct information in the different quadrants. So the first one, like I said, this is going to be in that first quadrant. Okay. So within our string, we're going to, we'll call this string name equals first title. And then that's going to be that what we copied, okay? And then if we look at this, it has a description as well. So we're going to have a title, we're going to have a description, title, description, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is the description for the first quadrant. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's say string name equals, and let's give that an ID of first description. Okay, and then we copy and pasted that one in there. Okay, so we're going to do that for all four of these. So this is going to be the second title. This is going to be the second description. This is going to be the third title. This is going to be the third description, and this is going to be the fourth, and this is going to be the fourth description. So let me go ahead and type those, and then once I type them, and then you can pause the video and you can copy them as I have them in my strings XML. Okay, so I copied everything over. So we've got the first title, the first description, second title, second description, third title, third description, fourth title, fourth description. So if you want to go ahead and pause just to kind of take a look and, either compare if you were typing or make sure that you have all of the descriptions. And these names are going to be important. So I try to keep them consistent so that you're going to be utilizing these names. Remember, you're going to be referencing these names, so it's important that they're exact. So make sure that you don't have any misspellings or anything like that. Because if you have misspellings in the name and they say you copy it over or type it correctly when you reference it, then it's not going to match. Also, just make sure now if you don't have any like red errors, then you're good. Okay. And so like I said, go ahead and pause if you need to. So once you have this, then we're going to go back over to our main. Now we're building a screen like this that's divided into 4 equal quadrants. So think of it as like a 2x2 grid. Okay, you're going to have a row, you're going to have a row 1 and a row 2. And in row 1, it's going to be a left and a right. And then in row 2, it's going to be a left and a right. The key challenge here is going to be making each quadrant take up the same amount of space. And that's where that weight comes in that we talked about before. Now, just a little review. In Compose, do you remember what composable lays the children out horizontally? Okay, if you said row, then you're correct. Okay, and what about which composable lays the children out vertically. And if you said column, then you're correct. Okay. Now, if you look at this, each quadrant has a different background color. Okay, so we're going to use the color values that it provided us here directly for that. We're going to place them in the code as color. Okay, but before we do that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to build out our main layout of our columns and our two rows. Okay. So we're going to build this entire screen. Okay, we're going to build our entire screen that we've had using a column. Okay, that's going to hold, remember, two rows. And each row is going to take up half the screen height using weight. And then each row will contain two cards. Okay, and those cards will split the row evenly using the weight again. Okay. Now the card, if you look here, okay, this is how each card is going to look. And so we're going to build like one composable that's going to act as the card, okay? And then we'll be able to reuse that composable in each one of the quadrants. So what I like to do first is I like to build the composable. I like to build like my reusable elements first because then I can connect them, you know, when I actually build out the actual string. Now, the reusable composable that we're going to use, that we're going to build, again, like I said, is going to represent each one of these quadrant cards. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to fill whatever available space is there. Okay, we want to be able to set a background color for it. We want to be able to add like maybe 16 dp padding all around. Okay, and that's what the specs here. Okay, we want to be able to center the content vertically and horizontally. Okay, and then we want to be able to bold the title and then give it a little bottom padding. And then we want to justify as far as the descriptive text. So what we're going to do is we're going to add that um, as a reusable component, composable. Okay, and so we'll start off composable. And this is going to be private because we're not going to call it directly. We're going to call it within and sometimes it wants to do things and you don't want it to do what it's doing. Sometimes it's a little goofy, this application. We're going to call it a composable info card. Okay, and what we want to do is, like I said, it's reusable. We're going to set up how the layout is going to look. Okay, and what we're going to do is, remember, these are functions. Okay, so we're going to feed in some parameters that is going to make each of these cards unique, you know, when we go to reuse them. And then within the function, we're going to build what the card is actually going to look like. So first, let's go ahead and let's look at what we're going to actually build, or what we're going to actually use as far as the parameter. Okay, so one of the things that we're going to feed it is going to be the title, and that's going to be a string. Okay, another thing, of course, we're going to be feeding it a description, and that is also going to be a string. We want to feed it. Remember, our quadrants are going to have different background colors. So we want to feed it a background color. And that's going to be color. And you'll see we'll import that in as far as color. And then we're going to any other modifiers. Okay. All right, so that's what we're feeding in, okay? All right, and then now let's go ahead and let's build it out. And for this, we want to go ahead and import the color. So we want to import class color. Okay, and if you wanted to see it here, you'll see that we imported it here. Okay, and so like I said, what we're going to do is we're going to create this quadrant card as a column so that we can stack. Remember how it looks here? We want to stack everything. We want to stack the title and we want to stack the description on it. So we're going to use, remember we said earlier when you want to stack things vertically, when you want to have them laid out vertically, then you're going to use the column. Okay, so we're going to say column. Okay, and modifier. And we're going to say fill max size. This is what's going to, remember, we want it to take up the entire space. We want to have the background be whatever the value of the background color parameter that we're feeding in. Okay, we want to do that padding, remember, and that's going to be that 16 dp. We want to make sure that we have the vertical, if I can spell, vertical arrangement is going to be arrangement center. And then we're going to say horizontal alignment is equal to alignment center horizontally. Okay, and we'll go ahead and handle as far as any imports that we need to handle that we're saying as far as like the alignment. We're saying that, I just want to make sure there's no other reason why, okay? So we have to do an import for that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and import that alignment. Okay. So now alignment is there. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we've created this column, and so in the column we want to say, you know, what do we want to have in there? So we've got our curly brackets. Within our curly brackets, we're going to have the title text, and then we're going to have the description. Okay, so we'll say text. We'll use the text and text is going to be like the title. Okay, that's going to be whatever we feed in. So whatever we feed into this function, which is the title. Okay, so remember that's coming from up here. So that's going to feed into that. And then we're going to have a modifier equals modifier padding bottom equals 16.dp. Okay, and then we're going to have for the title, we want to have the font weight, and we'll say that that's going to be bold. Remember, that was the specification that we had for that. Okay, and then we're going to have another, remember, text, and that one is going to be where we have our description. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and accept that. Again, you can go ahead and you can, what's going on here. So let's see what we've got going on here. You know what? I put a curly bracket instead of a parentheses. Let me get rid of that and change that to a parentheses. See, sometimes, like I said, it's the smallest things. You've got to really kind of take a look and see exactly, sometimes you mistype things. Okay, so we've got, this is our composable, our reusable composable. It is our composable info card. What we're going to do is, when we call this function, this composable function, we're going to feed in as far as the title and the description, the background color, and the modifier. And then this is how we're utilizing it. We're going to we're going to use a column because we want to stack things vertically. We're going to have it take the background color from our parameter here, whatever arguments that we put into this function. We're going to have padding, fixed max size so that we can have it take up the entire size. We want whatever components that we have within this column to vertically arrange, center, and then center horizontally so that it fits right within that column. Okay, and then within that column, we're going to have two components. We're going to have two text components. One is going to be our title, and remember we wanted to have a little padding at the bottom of it, of our title, just to separate it from the description. We wanted that to be in bold, and then remember our description, we wanted to have that justified, as far as text justified. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and let's build out as far as our quadrant, what the actual layout is going to look like. And that's going to be our quadrant app. Okay, so we're going to start with, again, composable. Okay, and this one is going to be a function called compose quadrant app. Okay, and we're going to be adding a little bit to this because if you recall with the other videos that we had, because we're using a scaffold instead of a surface, but we'll talk about that when we get ready to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to, for this, remember we're going to have one, for our quadrant, we're having one column, and then we're stacking two rows on top of it, two rows within that column, and then we're going to have within each of those rows, we're going to have two info cards, and that's how we're going to build it. So I'm going to go ahead and build this, and then I'll show you, we'll go over it once I've built it, okay? So I don't want you to, I'm a very slow typer, so I don't want you to have to wait for me to type, but let's go ahead. I'm going to build it and then I'll explain it. Okay, so this is our, let me see if I can stretch this a little bit so that you can see the entire thing. And again, if you wanted to pause it so that you can copy this. But the only thing that I had to do was I had to import the row. Okay, and we've done that on other videos that we've done layouts. So I actually had to go here and this is what was imported in order to be able to fix, because other than that it was showing an error message for row saying that I need to import it. Okay, so what we've got is we've got this compose quadrant app, and we're using a column, okay, and we're stacking two rows within that column. Okay, so basically two rows, one row, two row. Okay, and then each row Remember I told you as far as that weight, we want the row in order to be able to have equal, each row is going to get equal shared of the available height. So that's what this 1F means as far as the modifier weight. The 1F is saying each row gets equal share of whatever the available height is. Okay, so we've got that for both rows. Okay, and then inside of each row, each card here, we're giving it a 1F. And so again, what that's going to do is that's going to split the row evenly. Okay, so it's going to split this width evenly. So we did a 1F for the row so that we could have it take up the available space as far as the rows and split it evenly. And then within each row, we want to split it so that the rows have equal width. Okay, and this is going to be the key pattern. You know, weight again is what makes equal sections. Just kind of remember that. Okay, and then within each of the rows, we've got two cards. Okay, so that composable info card that we created. So we've got two cards, and what we're doing is we're feeding in the information that each of those cards should have. So this is the first card. Okay, so we're feeding in that first title. Okay, we're feeding in that first title as the title. So we're taking the first title, making that title, and then we're feeding it into the composable info card here, and then saying it needs to be printed here. Okay, and then for the description, we're feeding in the first description. Remember, this is from the XML file. Okay, and we're taking that description and we're saying, okay, feed that into the card. And so then into the card gets the description, and then the description gets laid out, you know, in the second position within that column. You see how that works? And then as far as the background color, what we're doing is we're making each of the ones different colors, and we're just using the colors that are here, you know, and we're feeding in the background color. Okay, so each one's going to have a unique color, and then that background color gets fed into this info card here, okay, as a parameter, and it uses that argument to actually place the background of the column. Okay, and then again, that modifier that we added, that modifier is just saying that it's going to be, this card is going to take up equal width. It's going to be even. Okay, so at this point, like I said, you can go ahead and pause the video. Let me move that out the way. You can pause the video to go ahead and copy this. But at this point, you should have a column with two rows, and each row is going to contain a composable info card call. Okay. Now, a couple of things I did want to mention is, why is this not scrolling? Okay. I don't know if it's my system or because I'm recording. Sometimes it just, my system acts a little weird. Just a couple of things I wanted to kind of explain. This field max size that we did here, what this means is that it's going to take up the full quadrant. You were given by weight. Okay. The padding, the 16 dp, remember that's going to apply to all the sides. That's going to be basically padding all around. If you remember your CSS, if you took like web development, padding is, top, bottom, start, end, that type of thing. And then like the arrangement center, remember we said that's vertically centering, and the alignment rather, center horizontally is that horizontal centering. And then the what we had here was the font weight bold, and that's going to make that first line stand out, and then again, we're going to have some padding at the bottom, okay? not all padding like we have up here where it's padding all around. We just want the padding at the bottom, and that's just to separate it, from the description. Okay, and then the text align is justified. Um, so again, your title is going to look bold, your description is going to be justified, then you're basically kind of matching, with everything. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to add this now to our scaffold. But before we do that, remember we have to add padding parameters and modifiers since that scaffolding is going to give us like an inner value. Remember, it gives us up here for the scaffold, it gives us this inner padding, this inner padding value. And so just like we did in the other things that the other ones that we worked with, we've got to, um, add as far as a lot for that padding that it's going to be feeding us. Okay. Okay. So within our quadrant app, we're going to add modifier, modifier equals modifier. Okay, so that we can accept, as far as the inner padding modifier and everything that the scaffold is actually feeding to us. Okay, now just real quick, the lowercase. Sometimes students get a little mixed up as far as because we say modifier, modifier. The lowercase modifier, this is just a variable name or a parameter name that's passed into this composable. So we're just like we did with the card where we passed in like a parameter. Um, we're doing the same thing here. So this is just something that we're passing in. And the uppercase M, this is the type or say the object and the function that we're going to be using. So like say modifier dot padding or something like that. So that's how we're going to feed that. Okay, so that's one of the things that we have to do when you're using a scaffold. If we were using like they used to use like surfaces and not scaffolds. But remember, as far as the scaffold, the reason why we're having to add this is because the scaffold gives us, like I said, that inner value. And this is gonna, by adding all of this, this is gonna prevent that overlap with the UI elements, with the top bar and the system UI. So the inner padding value has to be applied to our screen as a modifier. So when we go in, and now what we're going to do is instead of greeting, okay, instead of calling the greeting composable, we now want to call this this compose quadrant app composable. So we're going to get rid of that. Okay, and then we're adding as far as the modifier here. Okay, so if you did any of the other videos, it's the same thing that we added for those as well. All right, so now let's go ahead, now that we've got everything and we don't have any error messages, let's go ahead. So we want to preview this. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's change our preview down here, and we're going to actually be calling as far as the quadrant. Okay, so a couple of things we gotta change. We'll call this, instead of the greeting preview, we're gonna call this the compose quadrant preview. Okay. And then here we're going to call our compose quadrant app. Okay, and it's rendering a preview, so we'll give it time to do that. and it's kind of big, so we're gonna kind of resize it, and boom, see, there we've got everything. This is the way we wanted it to look. So comparing it to the design here, we've built the quadrant. Okay, and again, you can run this. We'll hit the let it load. You can run this in the emulator so that you can actually see it as far as in your Android, emulator. Let's do that. Okay, so we'll just click on that. We've got to wait for it to build, so it may take a minute to do that. Okay, and so if you're successful, then you'll see it in your emulator. Okay, so a few things you just want to validate. The screen is divided into, we see 4 equal sections. Okay, and each quadrant has sort of like the 16 dp padding around. The content is centered vertically, okay, and horizontally. Okay, and the title is bold. And the description uses just the default size, but it's justified. Okay, I don't like justified, but it is justified. Okay, and then the background colors match like the different background colors that we specified within the quadrant app. Now again, some of the changes that we made as far as the modifier, that inner padding, things like that. If you're watching this video as part of the course, then go ahead. I do have some extra information about that available in the LMS. That just kind of explains it. If you get that error message and you forgot to maybe add as far as the modifier to account for the fact of having the scaffold. Okay. But that's in there as well. But again, like I said, if you just make sure that you add as far as the modifier information, to the composable that you're calling within the scaffold, you should be fine. Now, notice we did not have to do that in the preview because the preview doesn't use the scaffold. Okay, so that inner padding doesn't exist there. Okay, so our preview, we just left it. We didn't have any parameters in there. Okay. All right, so that's it for this walkthrough. Just make sure, if you want to try building this again on your own, you can also look at the solutions that's available within the if you go like to the solution code, it'll show you the solution code. One thing, like I said, to keep in mind that, our app is using the scaffold, okay, and not the surface. I think the solution code uses the surface, but we are using the scaffold. So if you decide to just kind of copy a lot of the composable elements from there, the quadrant app, and as far as the layout or the info card, just make sure that you account for the fact that you're using a scaffold and add that modifier there. But if you get stuck, just go back and just rewatch whatever section that you need to watch and just kind of work through it step by step. Other than that, I will see you in the next video.